Welcome everyone to another edition of Fireside Chats. I'm very excited today to welcome these wonderful guests to talk about affordable housing. I cannot wait. My name is Jenny Eber. I am the constituent coordinator for FIAS, and I would like to toss it to Dennis Wedlick to introduce himself and talk about maybe one or two projects that he's currently working on.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dennis Wedlick. I am founder of Barless Wedlick Architects. We have offices in New York City and the Hudson Valley. I'm also co-chair of the American Institute of Architects, New York, Residential Architecture Knowledge Committee. I'm actually a principal emeritus. My work focuses entirely on coordinating affordable housing efforts in the Hudson Valley now, pro bono work. And primarily we focus on projects with Habitat for Humanity.
Great. David, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. My name is David Salamon. I work with Revision Architecture in Philadelphia. We have two studios, a sustainability consulting studio and a high performance architecture studio. I spend most of my time in the architecture studio, but I also consult for other architects on passive house projects, especially affordable housing, passive house projects. And yeah, right now our work is running the gamut from 3-unit, 3-story passive row house project to a university building to a several hundred unit market rate multifamily housing passive house project. And yeah, anyway, it's great to be here. So thank you very much.
Great, and James.
Yeah, hi all. I'm James Moriarty, Vice President at Sustainable Comfort. So we're primarily kind of raters, verifiers, and consultants, particularly in affordable housing. Upstate New York is a very large market, and really just try to work with developers, particularly in low-income housing tax credit projects, to kind of build the best buildings they can on the budgets that are set by them. And passive houses has been included along with other programs, LEED and NYSERDA programs and others. And so we try to help bring all the best efficiency items to those projects.
Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Michelle Tinner. I work with James at Sustainable Comfort. I'm a certified passive house consultant and also HERS rater. And I'm also the president of the Hudson Valley Passive House Alliance. So I'm just going to share a little bit about that. We have a great community of practitioners that comes together to share knowledge. And really what we're trying to do is push for mainstream adoption of the passive house standards through outreach and advocacy work at both the local and the state level. Couple of examples are that we have members that are working within their local communities to push the adoption of things like stretch code. And then more recently, we had some representation at the New York State Climate Council input session. Thanks, Jenny, for helping coordinate that effort for us. And if you are interested in what we're up to or ever want to check out any of our virtual sessions, we have a website, pha-hv.org. Not sure if I should get into much detail about projects. I kind of prepared a little bit about two of them, if that's okay.
Yeah, quick summary, if that's all right.
Okay, sure, yeah. So we have, a Buildings of Excellence competition in New York that's been going on. So the two that I want to highlight are award recipients of that. So they have not broken ground yet, but one is called Village Grove, and it's in Trumansburg, New York. And it's the developer there is Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services. It's a 2-story, 40-unit, new construction affordable project. And the thing I love about this project is that it's kind of a mixed income intergenerational community design. So aging in place, young families can purchase homes in a competitive market there. That's the idea. And then also it has rental units for the local workforce. So I think since we're talking about affordable, that kind of generational and financial integration is really what strengthens the communities. So beyond just, the passive house pieces that they are going for passive source zero, which is great. And of course, very exciting and important. And then the other one we're working on kind of along the similar vein is West Side Homes project in Buffalo, New York. And that's for being developed by Push Buffalo, which stands for People United for Sustainable Housing. And this one is really kind of community-led infill project, scattered site, where they even had members of the community kind of helping select the lots to revitalize the neighborhood, create sustainable housing, and also community facilities, but also living wage jobs for the residents in that neighborhood. And one of the cool aspects there too is that they're building a workforce development center in tandem so that they can educate and train like a low carbon workforce. And 2 of the buildings in that project, a 15 unit and a 4 unit, are going for PHiS certification. So
Excellent. And then Tim.
Hi, great to be here. My children might be coming in and out of the room for a minute. Sorry about that, but it's that time of day. I'm Tim McDonald. I'm president of Onion Flats. We're a development design build company in Philadelphia. And our own development work is primarily market rate multifamily. We focus exclusively on passive house and net zero, but we also have clients for which we do affordable housing design for, as well as consulting, similar to David, for passive house projects. And we've got one that we're working on currently, a 16 unit passive house net zero project in Baltimore, affordable housing. We won an RFP for a very large multifamily affordable mixed income project in Louisville, Kentucky, about 700 units. And we have one that we won the RFP for, but we're waiting on the financing for in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is a 24 unit passive house project. So that's us.
That's great. And I'm even more excited now after hearing about what you guys have done. So let's get started. We're talking about affordable housing, but you've all demonstrated and even touched on projects, or just a few of the projects that have already been certified affordable housing projects. It can be done on a budget within constraints set by municipalities or developers or any kind of hurdle that comes up in creating an affordable housing building. So we're here to talk about what's next. So what are each of you seeing for developers and clients? What sticks for affordable, certified passive house projects? What is coming that you guys are thinking about? Anyone who wants to start?
Say that one more time. What exactly are you asking?
What's next? What are you seeing for developers and clients? What sticks for affordable, certified passive house projects? We've established that affordable can be certified passive house affordable units can be done. Buildings can be done. What's the future? What are we moving towards? What are you guys thinking about rather than, oh, is it possible? It's possible. What are we doing next?
I don't mind starting. In the Hudson Valley, just to be clear, that need that we have, and probably from most of upstate New York, is affordable housing for workforce families. So not just low-income workforce families, but non-professionals and professional workforce families of lower to moderate income levels. And well, yes, it's true. We have proven that it can be done affordably and meet passive house standards. It doesn't mean that it can be done easily. And the reason that it can't be done easily is because it's not easy to get what we call shovel-ready sites. And that means that a developer will have the permits they need and the infrastructure they need, especially in our rural villages and hamlets, to build any home, regardless of it being new construction is simply not affordable without subsidies. It's just simply not for low income and moderate income workforce families. So what is next is, for us anyway, is trying to shift those resources that are available into marketplaces where those families are. And I think the misconception is that the bulk of lower income workforce families are in areas of higher density and are served by higher density housing solutions. When in fact, 4 out of 5 New Yorkers who receive housing subsidies do not live in higher density neighborhoods and in multifamily projects. So the money is there. It's not that we don't have the money there. We have to figure ways of getting that money, the housing that people need. And we have to figure out ways of getting the sites to be shovel ready. So that's what's next on our radar. So
I think what I see, and is my audio okay? Is there feedback?
There's a little bit of feedback.
A little feedback. I'm not really sure what to do about that. How's this? Is that any better? No?
That's okay. We'll persevere.
Okay, sorry about that. So what I was going to say is the thing that I'm seeing is kind of an erosion of incentives, right? So like PHFA, which is a fantastic organization, really started, really kicked off this market by adopting Passive House into their QAP, their Qualified Allocation Plan. And, you know, over the years, there's been pushback from the development community primarily. And, you know, some of those, and so the incentives have essentially gotten softened, right? And, you know, I'd say like easier to achieve standards, you know, you can get more points for them. It makes, you know, the effort to get to Passive House less worthwhile. And so I think that that's something that, you know, it's an issue that needs to be, you know, really proactively addressed. I think the thing that it'll take to address it is data from the built projects, which has still been, I feel like, a little bit hard to get. You know, but I think what would be important to show in order to strengthen these incentives and encourage new ones, and other states like Massachusetts have really like picked up the ball and are offering a ton of incentives, you know, so it you know, this is something that ebbs and flows and kind of varies state by state, and, you know, and varies over time. And, you know, and so there's tons and tons of people doing great work, and there still are incentives, you know, that are available. But I really think it's incumbent upon, you know, this community of designers, and, you know, I think it's fair to even call us like activist designers. I think we're all in this because there's, you know, we all hold a deeper belief in the work that we do. And, you know, I think that the thing that I see coming up next is just this real need to engage in a deeper way on the policy level and protect and reinforce the incentives that we have.
I totally agree with David. I think there has been, since PHFA started incentivizing Passive House multifamily projects in 2015, that's 6 years ago. Can you believe that, David? There have been a number of states that have done something similar, but even in those states, they've kind of pulled back. So I really think it's kind of power in the masses, right? So if this community wants Passive House more than anybody else, because we understand what it means to happen, I think the kind of policy efforts that that happened in Pennsylvania and that are currently happening in Massachusetts need to happen on a much larger scale. Because look, we're not talking about multifamily housing, we're talking about affordable housing. And affordable housing has a very specific financing structure that has leverage points built into it. And I just think we need a community of people. If that means, and I think this is kind of happening, but if that means a community of people in every single state, that makes it creates a committee and makes it their mission to get the Housing Finance Agency to start putting extra points in their QAP for Passive House. That's what's got to happen. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. But notice we're not talking about what needs to happen next is, anything to do with building the buildings or, that's figured out in many ways. It truly is about the issue of scale, because who says it? Who said it? I think it was McKibben. Going slow is the same as doing nothing. When it comes to fighting this effort to get all buildings in the next 20 years to be carbon neutral and everything after that, right? I mean, how insane is that as a goal? But like every day that doesn't happen, we're in a lot of trouble. And I really do believe that this affordable housing initiative is the way to get all building to the Passive House standard as standard building practice, because of the unique competitive financing structure that's built in. And when you get an affordable housing developer to build a Passive House building, you've also gotten a builder to build. You've trained the builder, you've trained the architects, you've trained the engineers, and are they going to go backwards? Maybe. But that's why I think this initiative in affordable housing is just so essential.
And it seems like, with the point structure that is there in these affordable housing programs, there needs to be sort of a mechanism to set Passive House apart, because if we're putting that on the same level as another green program, and we're seeing that, I think, even in stretch code, right? Passive House is just an optional path, but not necessarily required. And I was on there was a presentation yesterday on stretch, and I asked, well, is there actually any data that shows that stretch is promoting Passive House, or are people just using those other pathways, right, that are easier? Similar with our NYSERDA programs. They have been great champions for Passive House, but right now the way that their incentive structure works is that you can do, better than Energy Star and still, and, kind of toward a net zero goal, but a HERS rating that's slightly better and still access the same level of incentives that you could with a Passive House. So I think there's an important piece there to make sure that it's being set apart, that there are additional points, that there is additional funding for full certification.
Yeah, and to back on that, Tim, we've been following your work for years, and with PHFA being the first, we're primarily in New York, and they were a couple years behind. They offer points for Passive House. It's not nearly enough to move the needle. We submitted with 59% low-income housing template applications this year, and 3 of them included Passive House. And the answer is not convince them all one by one. It's try to get policy efforts to combine with that. And the good part, and I agree with you, that the QAP and the affordable housing is a mechanism, but it also can be bolstered by larger policy initiatives. And in New York, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act is coming online, and that has very aggressive targets. Passive House is one of the tools to get there. And once regulators discover that, they'll not only use that as a mechanism in affordable housing, they'll use that as a mechanism in stretch codes, they'll use that as a mechanism in all buildings and in rehab. And we saw that a lot this round, is that the affordable housing developers were told, we're going to review favorably projects that meet the goals of the Climate Leadership and Protection Act, that actually moved more mountains in our developers' minds than having extra points, because they're seeing that as a competitive advantage now, and Passive House is one of the tools. So that's definitely where I see it going, is trying to get not just the policy of the affordable housing, because they're incentivized to build more affordable. And if they think it's a choice between more units and efficiency because they have to push the cost around, if you have a higher regulation saying, well, we have separate money for that efficiency stuff, and this is a way in, like New York has climate bonds, and a lot of their affordable housing is financed through the Climate Bond Initiative, and they get access to more dollars, more international funding sources for those bonds by labeling them climate bonds. But like Michelle says, it's an Energy Star based. If we can make Passive House be a part of that would be great.
What I would like to challenge is what the mission is. And I think, what Passive House offers the ordinary workforce family is, a reliable low energy bill. And, very, very often you go into these discussions with departments of energy, and sometimes you hear energy is cheap, but energy is not cheap. It is not cheap for most ordinary families. I mean, nothing is cheap for most families. Clothing's not cheap. Food's not cheap. Your bill for your internet is not cheap. But certainly, energy is not cheap. And we have found it is the most effective way to raise families out of housing poverty, to get them into some home, especially if they're a home owner, into a home that has lower and reliable utility costs. So, as a society, we're investing heavily into the production of alternative energy sources. I mean, we really should be, even though Passive House is about reducing climate change and about conserving energy, we're a Passive House community. And I think we should be saying, hey, our own construction workers, our own employees, they can't afford a home, and we feel that they deserve a home. They deserve the highest quality home. The highest quality home is Passive House. And oh, by the way, if you get them into a Passive House, they're going to be able to stay in that home, for a very long time, enable them to stay in the communities they want to stay in. So I think that, for me, that is really important, because it's on the local level. And I think, as Tim said, it's the local level where we have to convince people. We have to talk to people on the town boards, the zoning boards, the affordable housing boards of the smaller level, and say, look, your constituents, they deserve new homes or retrofitted homes of the highest standards, and Passive House is the highest standards. You should require any money that's coming in here to go for that kind of home. Because, oh, by the way, all your other mission statements about climate change, they're all going to be solved at the same time. So you're putting in solar panels, you're putting in solar fields. This should be your highest priority, and it's going to help the people that live here.
Dennis, you made me think about something there. And because I'm constantly looking for leverage arms, right? How do we leverage this condition, that the condition of affordable, or the financial issues around affordable housing, how it gets funded and so forth. And you just raised a really important point that's kind of a blind spot that we have. Every state, I believe, and at least over 400 cities in the United States have climate action plans, correct? And all of them are based on the Paris Climate Agreement, which is effectively carbon neutrality by 2050, even though 2050 is too late. Let's just take that for a second. What would it be like for you to say to get the voice of local, and I like your point about local politicians, like city, municipal level. Excuse me, You signed a climate action plan that says all buildings have to be carbon neutral by 2050. When are you going to start that? Like there's this separation between the political, people say there's no political will for this. What are you talking about? Everybody's signed on to the Paris Climate Agreement. So I think an initiative to actually hammer that point home at every council meeting, at every housing finance agency at a municipal level as well as the state level. I mean, that's what we should be doing. We should be shaming the hell out of our politicians for not doing what they say they're going to do. Sorry, I get a little, excited.
Tim, I totally agree. And oh my God, I don't know why my cat is doing this right now. He never does this.
My cat
only
made an
'cause he-
appearance in every one of these, so sorry.
Is the audio better now, by the way? I switched the headphones. Still not better. I don't know what's going on. I'm really sorry.
David, it's fine. It's just a little scratchy.
Okay.
It could be that you're smoking more.
That's probably it. Yeah, I can't hear it. So at any rate, so Tim, yeah, you brought up leverage points, and Dennis, what you said made me think of this as well. And thinking of just government, right, and our politicians, and the way we influence, and the way we can have influence, and you take something like the power outages that we just had down in Texas, right? And those power outages were a result of Texas insulating its grid from the rest of the country expressly because they don't like government regulation, right? They went so far as to completely separate their grid so that they would not have to adhere to, resiliency regulations, that are standard across the rest of the country. And, I think that, we could attack that, right? But, the brilliant thing about a program like the PHFA program, right, is that it incentivized developers to build better buildings without a punishment, right? And I feel like, within every, crisis is an opportunity, and like the crisis down in Texas is just a tremendous opportunity potentially to promote passive house. Because what did they have? They had an overburdened grid. And what do passive houses do, right? They, reduce the draw on the grid, right? We're creating low power buildings, right? So that there's less of a draw on the grid and there's more power for everybody, whether or not they're a passive house. Passive houses provide a tremendous community level benefit, regardless of whether you live in one or not. And, and regarding like the incentives versus, that kind of like carrot versus stick approach, okay, folks down in Texas, they don't want to be, they don't want to have to spend the money to, reinforce their grid if they're being told to do it. But if there were incentives, right, to build better buildings, right, and to make more, and to add resiliency to the grid through passive house construction, right? I know they're fine with taking the money. They're gonna take it as disaster relief, right? Instead of taking it as disaster relief, let's incentivize building better buildings down there. And so I think that potentially this is a leverage point. It's like we're going to pay sometime, right? Either going to pay proactively and incentivize these types of projects, or we're going to pay because it's disaster relief and it's coming out of all of our, all of our taxes. And so, yeah, I think that the idea of looking for those leverage points is critical. Another one that I've done some thinking about is just the real estate industry, the appraisal industry. And I think that's a critical place to right now these passive house projects are just, I think, undervalued, right? And so, another just massive project is like, how do we change the MLS, listings to get some of this sustainable criteria, actually valued. because it's very difficult still to, sometimes make this an economic case to our clients.
I guess I just want to jump in here quick with this statistic that I looked up earlier. I was doing a little homework, and Dennis, you were talking about energy poverty, and according to the U.S. Energy Administration, almost 1/3 of U.S. households actually experience energy poverty, which means that when they're getting high energy bills, they're cutting back on things like food or medicine or doctor's visits. And so it's not just a small percentage of people, it's literally 1/3. And I think that's something important for us to keep in mind. It's maybe not just the folks that are qualifying to be in affordable housing units, but families that, or maybe homeowners that are struggling to stay homeowners. And I really love the model that you have, Dennis, with affordable home ownership. I think that's very empowering and important for the local communities, especially up in upstate New York here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got to get radical here. Honestly, I do. I think that when we're talking about incentives and subsidies, I don't think it's to the developers. I think it's got to be in the hands of the people. I mean, in New York State, a typical household, New York State invests what, $1 million in public education per household? So is it very radical to say, give every family $100,000 to retrofit their homes? I mean, it's not really that radical, because you think about, people say they have a right to, public education. They have a right to health and welfare. Well, they have a right to housing stability, energy stability, so is that impossible to imagine? It's not, because unlike public education, people will pay it back. I mean, you create community, programs so that the money can go, by way of trust, community trust, or by there's a million different vehicles that can go to families, so that they can retrofit their home. Now, of course, we want it to be passive house standards, but as Tim, as you said, they all have the same mission. So it's already in their mission. It's already in their planning, master plan. It's already in their zoning. There's no more selling of that. You just say, we need this money. We need this money. And because there is no way that we are going to retrofit all the homes in New York State if we are waiting for developers to take that money to do it. There's just no way it's happening. And all those that are suffering from energy poverty, it's because they never had the money to even make the minor improvements on their home. Yeah. So I think it's almost like reparations. I mean, what got us in this mess in the first place, right? I mean, back in the 70s, if we kept going where we were going in the 70s, we would have all been in passive houses by now. We would have all been using solar energy. So all of these policies that have gone wrong have really disenfranchised all of this whole group. So I think it's time to ask them for money directly into the families that own homes or want to buy a home to get to where they can be, guaranteed to not live in housing poverty.
And I got to say, Dennis, you and I have to hang out more. I don't think I've met you, but man, I love the way you think and talk, because you said radical. I was thinking the whole time as you were speaking, we've got to be like ninjas. We've got to get in there hard and fast. This is not about, convincing this person and that person. It take generations. And specifically around, you raised to me the issue that should take up 50% of our time, which is retrofits. And so, NYSERDA is doing what they're doing with the retrofit program. Realize is doing what Rocky Mountain Institute is doing something similar. And I don't know who's watching this, but just a really quick summary of what that is. These are programs that are modeled after the Dutch program called Energy Sprong, which is a brilliant idea of retrofitting multifamily rental as well as homeowners buildings with exterior panelized systems so that it allows the family to stay in the unit while the retrofit's happening. And it's the retrofit is these high performance walls that have the mechanical systems and the triple pane windows and all of that stuff. So, you know, you're putting a sweater around, we've got to put sweaters around every single building in this country, in this world, in the same time, right? I could tell you this, I didn't want to talk about this, but we are actually working, our company is working with Rocky Mountain Institute right now, because this is where I'm most excited. And everybody that I've talked to about how the whole energy, US energy sprung thing is going, nobody can figure that. We can figure the technical part out, but we can't figure to be replicable, but we can't figure the financial replicability out, right? Because the question is, who's going to pay for it? And Dennis, thank you. Yes, that's one way for individual homeowners. Maybe it's the same for large owners of multifamily affordable housing. We're dealing with one developer right now who has hundreds of buildings, and we have just analyzed, and I don't even know if I want to say this, but we've just analyzed, we've taken one of those buildings and we've designed an entire retrofit strategy for it. And we were scared to death about what the numbers would be. Now we're builders, right? So we can come up with preliminary budgets and see how it can be, whether it can work or not. And we're in the middle of that process, but I'm 50% less than I thought it would be. So what is that saying? It's saying, if we can prove this with this one building, that's the biggest issue. The biggest issue is is the mystery of it all. Everybody's like, how do we do this? It's got to be too expensive. Well, we're finding that it doesn't have to be too expensive. And so I think more of that kind of innovative work, and it's just really hard to get it off the ground because where's the funding to get it going? And
I don't think it matters if it costs $100,000. And I'm not going to take credit for this environmental justice issue. It was Michelle that brought it up in our preliminary discussion. And I looked it up. I mean, you have states suing for reparations because of environmental justice. And this is an environmental, who is suffering the most, right? Who has suffered the most by these energy policies? It has been the lower working class. It has been the next generation. They have been suffering because since 1975, we have been subsidizing energy production at enormous amounts of money, and we have not been helping these families at all. So it's time to give them a check. It's time to give them a check. And if you do it through communities, you are doing it evenly and equally. If you hit those neighborhoods that have been hit the worst by this environmental justice issue, then it's even and equal, and it's fair. So, and we can go around. You know where these people live. You know who are suffering the most from energy poverty. They all live in the same neighborhoods, and they're all the ones that have their lifespans shortened because of it. I mean, this is time to say, give them $100,000 through the community and make those homes meet passive house standards. It's just time to do it.
Yeah, and it's not just about the energy poverty is obviously a huge piece, and the carbon reductions is a huge piece. But as James knows, I always like to talk about the health impacts. And I feel like it's so exciting that building features can promote health and well-being, like having access to windows with views. Okay, you might not sit next to a drafty window, right, if it's cold in the winter, but with a triple pane window, you'll set your desk up. Maybe your kids has homeschool now and they can set their desk up and they can still be studying in a very quiet environment. And, we know that it promotes health outcomes. It promotes, better sleep. It promotes productivity, all these different kind of things. And the beauty of the passive house is that these kinds of health features are inherent in the standard. So not only are we giving, financial stability, but creating an environment that can help people thrive. And especially if you think about the sad state of what affordable housing looks like now and what the types of conditions that people are living in that are probably detrimental to their health and adding a ton of stress. So, yeah.
Yeah, we know why they're suffering. We know how they're suffering, and we know how to help them, right? So I think we should just get together, hire a good lawyer, and sue them. I think that's what we should do. And I'm totally serious. I think that we should sue them. Since what, since, we know the date when the inauguration came in and put the brakes on the Department of Energy that was just created to make sure that all our families were in more energy efficient homes, that all our families, had access to alternative energy sources. We would not be here if it were not for those energy policies. And it's time to say, okay, that was a huge mistake, and there's no reason you can't make up for it. And you know what? Our families will pay you back. Just start writing them a check to fix their problem. And their problem has everything to do with their homes and the fact that they're struggling with housing poverty. Their health is at risk. I mean, they can't go to the dentist because they literally have to put their money into their housing, and they can't go to a dentist. No way, ever since this policy's gone through, their lifespans have dropped. And yet they're fully employed. So you can't, so where are we going with this? We have the solution. I think we should just sue them.
Wow, I did not expect this fireside chat to go there. I love it.
Put in the fire in a fireside.
And Jenny, that was only your first question.
That was my first question. I'm a little bit afraid to see if we're still on track for the rest of my questions.
By the
we
way,
answered all your questions. I mean, I was prepared from all your
Dennis
questions
has
for
it.
that speech. I hit it all.
I'm gonna, you're not gonna see me for a minute because I gotta get into the car and take my daughter, but I'm gonna stay on with my phone, okay? Because I can't miss any of this now.
Absolutely. Let me see where we get with the next question. So we can reject this, we'll take a vote, but how much does funding influence these projects, and how do you think about funding and design or build, how do you think about and design or build the projects with the influence of funding in play? Is that clear? Do we hate that question? Would we like to do another one? I have a question about policy if we want to skip. Can you hear me? Any takers?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat the question about funding again?
Sure.
Maybe we'll jump to
How much
policy. But
does funding,
yeah, if you can just repeat it.
Yeah, how much does funding influence your projects? Does it play into how you build and plan your affordable?
Well, I can go first with Habitat. So it had going for passive house standards for Habitat had an interesting twist on funding. It enabled them to get more money from their donors. So whereas they knew they would have to spend more to do a passive house, but they because it's Habitat, it's a volunteer labor. It's all volunteer labor. So it wasn't an increase in cost because of labor. It was an increase of cost because of materials and just kind of the curved start. But on the flip side, it did help them raise more money. So that's on when it comes to funding and getting projects that are community based and where you have to raise money for, it actually has a net positive impact.
Yeah,
So I would liken that on our project to like a marketing advantage. We were talking with the developer just last week and trying to sell the idea of, do you want to do passive house or do you want to just maximize incentives, do net zero, get your utility costs down? And he said, well, why would I do the thing but not shout from the mountaintop I did the thing? Of course I'm going to do passive house if I'm going to do it. But the other side to that talking about rehabs really made me think, this being a passive house group, is passive house is really hard for rehabs. And if we market and we message that passive house is the answer when 60 to 80% of our housing stock is already there and isn't going to be built new and isn't going to be retrofitted and is in existing communities with an existing infrastructure that also needs investment, are we better off investing in that existing infrastructure? And that does that actually work in conflict with passive house is the answer, because they might not always line up. And that's maybe just a messaging thing from the industry, that if we're saying everything has to be passive, well, what about the homes that can't do it on rehabs, or just go halfway because they want to rehab as they do? I'm doing siding, let me put extra siding on, let me do better windows when I'm doing windows. So that messaging is valuable in the market for sure. But that only works for, I'm going to do one flashy project and I'm going to build all the rest of mine the way I was before.
Yeah,
So
Well, I think that's
funding
why we need
and
a
the
big chunk
help.
of money. The retro has to, even if you weren't going for passive house standards, we all know the piecemeal approach doesn't get you there. So even if you're not going for passive house standards, you really should hit all the 5 points that we all need to get hit. And in New York State, they want to electrify everything. So you can't even think about electrifying everything if you're not going to get close to the passive house standards. So they're kidding themselves to think that, these little programs that they put out to help people, weatherize their homes is going to align with the idea of electrifying everything. So, I think passive house is their only option, for retrofits that work with electrification.
The question of funding is a really interesting one, because there's a couple of different ways to look at, right? So what do you need funding for? You need funding to pay for the building. And so everyone's like, well, how much does it cost, right? And does it cost more? And, and that is really depending, the answer to that can shift as well, right? So, for example, where is passive house related to the code, right? How much above code is passive house? So when we were building passive houses, we were on the 2009 code, right? There's quite a big gap in quality there. Now that we're on the 2018 code, right? The amount of, extra, right? And there is extra, there's extra materials, there's extra air sealing, there's extra equipment, but that gap has gotten a lot smaller. So, one way you can look at it is, yes, there is a premium, for passive house that requires additional funding. On the other hand, what we've learned from the PHFA projects is that when you look at all the passive houses that get built and interspersed with all the non-passive house projects that were funded by PHFA as well, you can't pick out which projects are passive house and which aren't based on how much they cost. It's a totally even spread, and so what that tells us is that there are a lot of other factors that go in to a building that have, frankly, greater cost variability than just whether it's a passive house or not. I think that, and I kind of want to bring it back just a little bit to what I said before about the real estate industry. And I really think that passive houses in general are undervalued. And, and the way this relates to funding is that, you're a homeowner, let's say you're an individual homeowner, and you go to a bank and you say, I want, X amount of money to fund this project. Or maybe you're a big developer and you're doing, big multifamily projects and you're trying to finance those too. And whether it's affordable housing or not, right? Like right now, the banks aren't giving these projects the appropriate valuation. Because things like, like Dennis and Michelle brought up about, resiliency and health, right? Those are not valued. The fact, the decreased reliance on grid to maintain interior comfort, the energy efficiency, the reduced utility bills, none of those things are currently valued in our market the way they should be.
Just careful what you wish for, having passive houses valued much higher than traditional homes, because that has an impact on people's taxes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point.
we had this discussion last night, actually. Are you talking about Dan Levy's example by any chance? No. Okay. There's a builder. He built the passive house in Woodstock, and you know about it. And basically, I guess it's the town tax assessor assessed that passive house really highly, and his taxes went way up, while you know, the real estate industry still not valuing the house necessarily at that level. So he literally sold his house, and he's, you know, his next project is going to be in a different community. And
Interesting.
there needs to be a lot more awareness. I don't know too much about it, but you know, around how those two industries are handling energy efficient homes, because there shouldn't be penalties for homes that are more efficient in terms of taxes. You know, we're not trying to reduce people's energy bills and then have them end up with higher taxes.
That's a great point.
At the same time, the value needs to go up in terms of the real estate market.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but I don't understand. Like, in the end, I want to go back to Dennis's sue them, because in the end, this needs to be code sooner rather than later. So I think what we're talking about is this weird in-between space of the people that are out in front and that are doing this work in order to demonstrate that it's feasible. Okay, we'll take our lumps, but if we don't have in the next 5 years this as standard, next 10 years maybe, building code, I mean, what's the point anyway?
well, Tim.
Yeah,
I mean,
but Tim, we
I
were
don't know.
talking
Did you?
about valuing homes because they meet passive house standards, and I was just saying you want to be careful about wishing that they're higher, that they're valued higher. It's just like homes are not valued higher because they're prettier. I mean, valued because they have 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, you know, and yes, when you go sell them, prettier houses sell higher. But when it comes to paying your taxes, you don't pay more taxes if your house is prettier. I mean, that's supposed to be I think that it's tricky. It's just tricky because, you know, people don't have closets. You know, people one time didn't design closets because their taxes would go up if they had closets. It's just tricky to start, you know. I think it's better to focus on getting people the money to make their houses passive, regardless of, you know, of whether they're more valuable or not.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I heard the whole conversation around the house that he had to sell the house because the taxes. It's kind of an anomaly, I would imagine, and it's absurd. But, you know, at the same time, one might imagine that our taxes are going to go up in general over the next 20 years if we think we're going to have the ability to pay for all of this, right? And whether it's through you know, through the government, we send our taxes to the government, and the government sends it to individuals or developers, or whether it doesn't matter. Ultimately, the real question is, there is no they, it's all of us, right? So I'm not even, I guess my point is this, that I'm not so concerned about the financial ramifications as it relates to taxes on any one individual, one developer, anything. I don't care, because what's the alternative? You know, we want to talk about taxes. What is it going to cost us if we do get beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade warming the globe, and we can't stop, you know, within the next 100 years, a 12 feet sea level rise? What are we going to talk about? How are we going to talk about taxes then?
Yeah, I mean, I think another way of looking at it is achieving the same thing what David is suggesting by demonstrating how the everybody's property value goes up by having higher quality homes. So you emphasizing that, you know, your neighborhood is going to be a better neighborhood by getting people into higher quality homes. So there's a value added to bringing passive house standards in without scare. I mean, it's very easy to scare people off, and it's very easy for tax assessors to do that, you know, to say, you know, well, you know, this guy who may be somebody who's, you know, against, you know, the climate change, you know, let's charge the guy who does passive house standards, you know, more tax money. But at the flip side, I think we should, you know, say everybody, you know, is part of a more valuable community if they adhere to, you know, the mission of climate change. And oh, by the way, passive house is your ticket to do it. And you as a homeowner, you as a community member can do it. You're empowered to do it. You don't have to have somebody impose this upon you. You're empowered to do it. We just need the money. We just need the money, and we'll get you the money, and we'll make sure whoever gives you money gets paid the money back. I mean, seriously, we'll pay them back. You know, we can pay them back over. I mean, money is cheap. I mean, communities can get money at like a 0.5% interest rate. Money is so cheap. So there's no reason that we can't get these homes $100,000, you know, and we can get it cheap and they will pay it back. I think that's what we need to focus on.
I want to just,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention, because Tim had mentioned the building code. The ICC, the International Code Council, just recently changed the way that decisions are made regarding the energy code. And so what they've done is they've basically taken away the voting rights of government officials that used to participate in this decision-making process, and they're giving now more weight to you know, the builders lobby and energy industry lobbyists. And so, you know, the AIA put out a statement earlier, I think this week, about it. But it's a really significant issue. And, you know, we talked briefly about the, you know, Paris Climate Accords, and, you know, and how individual communities, you know, are all signed on to that. A step like this that takes away transparency and accountability in the code making process is a really significant step backwards. And I think it's something that we all really need to pay attention to and try to undo.
Heard about that this week.
And it would seem like the best opportunity to align them, a international climate accord and an international code council. And so many municipalities adopt the international code as their base code, that seems like the biggest way to do it. You'd think that would be internationally the way forward.
Yeah, and I mean, frankly, you know, like I said, I mean, you know, it was not that long ago. I mean, we just adopted the 2018 code in Philly, like what, in the last year, and you know, before that we were stuck on the 2009 code in part because of the builders lobby, you know, and it's just a tremendous improvement. You know, I mean, we kind of sometimes we disparage code minimum, you know, and because we're doing above code stuff, but like 2018 code it's a good code and it's moving in the right direction, and we need to make sure it keeps moving in that direction.
I like that. And at that point, we're coming to our hour, so just like everyone's last word for now on where we're going in this topic, and hopefully we get around to maybe in person sometime. But I would say, Michelle, would you like to start us off with your last thoughts?
Yeah, my last thoughts, I guess, let's be more radical. And hopefully next time we all meet, we can have a beer together. It was really a pleasure to be part of this conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. David?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I guess I just wanted to thank you, Jenny, for organizing this, and everyone on the call, because it's, you know, it's really easy, especially these days in these kind of pandemic times, to, you know, I go from my bed to my desk and 1.5 short steps. And it's very easy to kind of get stuck in this increasingly small world. So it's really refreshing to hear from all of you and hear about your projects and what you're doing and your thoughts on these big issues. Yeah, I'm just really appreciative of being part of this tremendously inspiring Passive House community. So thank you.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, I agree, echo everyone. Happy to be a part of this. And really, I think my takeaway from listening to everybody is really just seeing Passive House as a value statement in and of itself, to say that this is a thing that should be valued. And Passive House is a way to frame that. It's ventilation, it's fresh air, it's security, it's safety, it's comfort, it's health, it's energy security. It's those things. It can be equally valued as looks, as location, as those various things, and it needs to be a part of the conversation. And we need to do it. We need to do it fast.
Tim?
All I can say is my interest after doing this kind of work for about 15 years has shifted. It's shifted from figuring out how to do it to do it, meaning build Passive House buildings, to politics and policy, and the law after tonight. Thank you, Dennis, because I hadn't thought about the law part of it. I'm angry. There are way too many tools at our disposal that, as a Passive House community, we're ignoring. I think we should be shifting our attention to those tools, those political, policy, and legal tools, to really make a difference. Because I don't care if a couple of thousand, tens of thousands more buildings get built or retrofitted to the Passive House standard in the next 20 years. It doesn't matter. It won't matter at all. So as far as I'm concerned, what we should be doing is having committee meetings and meetings like this, where we actually identify leverage points to take on, and then set our ninjas loose in every single state. And that those can be policy, political, legal, but if we don't, and I mean in the next couple of years, who cares? Sorry, that's me. Anyway, this is wonderful.
That's okay. That's okay. Dennis, who cares?
Yeah, I think what we're all saying is we need to shift Passive House to not be thought of only as a standard, that belongs, it's written in some book, and as soon as NYSERDA picks it up, we're done. It's not that. I think we need to think of Passive House as a community of friendship, right? And in order to get things done, I'm a big believer, you have to throw a party, right? So what we need to do is have a Congress. If we're serious about this, if we're serious about, finding a way to hold feet to the fire, we need to plan a Congress, and we all get together and we come up with a Bill of Rights, what we believe is a Bill of Rights. We all get together, figure out the steps of how we're going to hire the people, because there are consultants that know all about environmental justice and know how to get these things done. Let's have a party. Let's have a Congress, and let's get this done. And I would be more than delighted to be in a party with these guys. I mean, it was so much fun. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much.